All right, so for those who do not know me, my name is Colin Sprouse. I'm the student and young adult pastor here, and I get the awesome opportunity to continue a series like the one we just started last week called Broken People. I love the fact that we're at a church that does series like this, because I think we don't shy away from the reality of the world that we live in, and in the reality of the world that we live in, we're all broken, every single one of us. I think this is one of those series that is going to hit very close to home because we all can identify with being broken. And my eyes were kind of open to this idea of brokenness just a couple of weeks ago. I'll share two examples that, again, really help us get in this mindset of how broke we really are, how broken we really are. So the first is very simple. A couple of weeks ago, I went to go play basketball with some of the young adults here. And it was really cool, awesome. We just played at this park. And what happened was I jumped up, and when I jumped up, my knees really hurt. I was like, oh man, I'm 29, but my knees are pushing 45 because my body's breaking down. I was like, I got to play lower to the ground now. I can't be jumping like I used to because just my body's breaking down, right? And maybe you can relate to that. Your body's not as quick as it used to be. You get tired a lot easier. You're falling asleep, sitting on the couch. It's okay. It's all right. We can be real. Our bodies break down. But the bigger example of feeling like my whole life was crumbling, a couple of weeks ago, that same weekend, actually, that same very day where I played basketball, I went to go take my car to get an oil change. Routine oil change, and yes, I take it to the place to get oil change. I don't change my own oil. I'm sorry. You can take my man card away, whatever you want, but I'm paying somebody else to do it for me. I'm sorry. But I went, and it was supposed to be just a routine oil change. And you know how they do. They always try to tell you, this needs changing, this filter, you got your tires falling off, how you still driving, all that sort of stuff, right? They were selling me the whole thing, and I was like, no, I'm good. But then they said, hey, but you really do have this oil leak. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, you've had this oil leak. It's crazy that you haven't noticed it. Really, the undercarriage of my car was catching it all. And they were like, hey, this for real needs to be fixed now. And I was like, dang. This I can't skip by. So they were like, we need to find the source of the leak. So I was like, all right, fine. At first, I thought I was just going to sit really quick oil change, sit there, scroll on my phone, and then be done. But they were like, hey, we're going to need a couple hours to figure it out. So I had to walk home. Luckily, I only live about a mile away from the place where I get my oil change. So I walked home. As soon as I get home, they're like, hey, we found the leak. You're going to need to come pick up your car because we can't fix it. I was like, whoa. Well, you guys are supposed to fix the car for me. And they were like, no, it's too big of a job. We got to take out the engine. You got to take it to a specialist. So I had to walk all the way back just to get my car, and then I had to take it to the specialist. And the day that we're getting ready to take it to the specialist, my wife was going to take her car to help drive and all that sort of stuff. And then her battery dies. And I was like, come on, man. Like, which car is working? And I felt like my whole life was falling apart, and the cars are falling apart by God's grace alone, and both cars are fixed. We're good, praise God, all that. But for a second, it felt like everything was breaking. My body was breaking down. My car was breaking down. It just felt like everything in my world was breaking. And I think that feeling is what's very relatable. Because I think many of us can probably relate to that. Maybe it started with the same situation that I had, where truthfully your car, there was this major unexpected car breakdown, and truthfully that is just a domino that leads to this financial breakdown that you're in. Where your finances feel all up in the air, you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you literally feel like you're broke. Because financially it's unstable. Financially your life is crumbling. Or maybe for you it's not necessarily financial, but maybe it's relationally. Maybe you look at your marriage and it's hanging on by a thread. And there's this question on if we're gonna be able to get through this. If we're gonna have to break up this family. I think that's where it becomes a lot more relatable, and then your whole family life feels broken. If it's not your family life, sometimes it's our very selves. Mentally, we're breaking down. Maybe for you this week, you can experience or you can relate to the reality of, hey, I just had a crazy panic attack at work. Crazy panic attack at school, because mentally you're just going through it. And mentally you feel broken. Emotionally you feel broken. And it feels literally like the whole world around you is crumbling. And here's the thing that's not going to sound encouraging. It is. We live in a broken world. And unfortunately, because we live in a broken world, there's more and more brokenness we're going to be dealing with day to day. And as I think about this brokenness, as I prepared for this message, the one thing I was reminded of is what we just sung not too long ago, is even though we live in a broken world, we still have a faithful God in it. And as I was looking at this broken world and I was thinking through what message I was going to bring, a couple of weeks ago, probably about a month ago, I brought a message from the book of Judges when I looked at Gideon, if you guys were here. And we looked at this Judges period, and Israel was stuck in this sin cycle. They would sin, and then they do all this bad, and then they turn back to God, and then God would raise up a judge, and then they turn back to, it was just this cycle over and over. And during this Judges period, it sounds like it was going to get better. The reality is it got worse and worse and worse. It just led to more brokenness, more corruption, more violence, more idolatry, and the world just got more and more broken. And the book ends with this very simple verse that paints a picture as to why the world was so broken. This is what it says in Judges 21, verse 25. It says, in those days, Israel had no king. And this is why, because everyone did as was fit. Everyone did as they saw fit. So in this world, everybody pretty much became their own kings and queens of their own lives. And I think that's where I was brought back to this book of Judges, because I think it's so much into what we see today. Everybody wants to be the king and queen of their own life. Everybody wants to be the ruler of their own life. And everyone's truth is their own truth. Everyone's way is their own way. And what happens is, in a world where everybody's a king, it just becomes more chaotic and it becomes more broken. And I think that's the world that we're living in now. That's the world we're going to step into and read about now. But that's very much the world we live in now. Everybody wants to be king, everybody wants to be queen, but nobody has a true king of their life. And Jesus, spoiler alert. But here's what I want to do is, in the middle of this broken story that we see Israel in, this sin cycle that they're in, all this wickedness, all this craziness, all this idolatry, what we find in the book after Judges is this short book of only 4 chapters of the book of Ruth. And the book of Ruth takes place during this whole Judges period. And the book of Ruth, if you guys know of it, it's this love story, right? But more than just love story that I see, what I see is this story of faithfulness. And that's where I want us to find some encouragement. That in the middle of this broken world, we see this story of faithfulness. And as the book starts out from the very intro, just to kind of set the scene a little bit, there's this family, there's this husband, his name is Elimelech, and he moves his family from Bethlehem to this place called Moab. And Moab was this place that was truthfully totally against God. They were totally against God and his people. They were just as corrupt as what Israel was facing at the time. And what happens is he moved to Moab because there was this famine back in Israel, and he thought he could find a better life elsewhere. But what happened there, unfortunately, is that whole family fell apart, because very soon after that, he died, and he moved there with his 2 sons. His 2 sons married 2 Moabite women, and his 2 sons died. And it's not really about him anymore. The story shifts to these 2 people, Naomi and Ruth. Naomi just lost her husband, just lost her 2 sons, and just cultural context, reality of the world she lived in. As a woman during this time, her whole life fell apart because now she has no financial stability. All of that came from the man. She has no safety, security, because again, she's now a widow in this society. And she has no way of truthfully thinking about a life that's being held together by anything. Her whole life crumbles. Her whole world is broken. And the only thing that she's left with is her 2 daughters-in-law. One of them being Ruth, who's the title of this book. And she turns to her daughter-in-laws and she says, hey, my life's broken. This land that I'm in, it's messed up. I'm going to go back to where I was before. I'm going to go back to Israel, go back to Bethlehem. You guys, I don't want you to have to deal with my brokenness. So you guys stay here, and I'm going to go back home. That's what she says, her daughter-in-laws. One of them says, yeah, okay, I'm going to stay here because, this brokenness is enough. I just lost my husband. Now you want me to move to another foreign land? No, I'm going to stay put. But Ruth is where we begin to see this story of faithfulness start to happen. Because in the face of her own loss of losing her husband, and this idea of going to a foreign land, instead of listening to her mother-in-law, this is what she says. She says, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. She chooses loyalty. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. And even bigger than that, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you from me. In this world where it's full of chaos, full of brokenness, we see this foreign woman, Ruth, say, hey, I'm choosing to be faithful and loyal to you. And wherever you go, I'm going to go. She chooses faithfulness in this broken world. And greater than choosing faithfulness, it's really this conversion type statement she makes. She says, hey, your God, the true God, Yahweh, that's the God I'm going to trust in. May the Lord deal with me ever so severely. She chooses God in the middle of this brokenness, in the middle of her pain. She still chooses loyalty and faithfulness to her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law is trying to get rid of her. And that's where I'm challenging. This brings me to my first point. The first thing we can learn from this story is faithfulness follows God into the unknown and uncomfortable. When you look at Ruth's story, again, she had her homeland and she was challenged she said she would leave that homeland and step into a land she's unfamiliar with. She doesn't know what it looks like over there. She heard last time they were there was a famine. You want to talk about unknown and uncomfortable? That's a weird thing for her to choose. Yet she's willing to follow God into that. And it makes us look at ourselves and ask ourselves if we're willing to do that same sort of faithfulness with the God that we love, with the God that we follow. And here's where I'll say, I don't think we do. Because when God tells us to move, we want to know what step 1 is, what step 2 is, what step 3 is, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we'll move. We want to know the full plan. We want to know all the details. We don't want to be left in this feeling of unknown. If you want to talk about comfortable, we need to leave when it's comfortable to us, when we feel like leaving, when it's lined up with my 5-year plan. We want to serve in the way that's comfortable to us. We don't want to serve in a way that's uncomfortable. It has to line up with my schedule. Yet this idea of faithfulness that we see in this story is the total opposite from Ruth. She goes into an unknown land, and we'll see in a little bit, she's made to take up this very uncomfortable position. Why? Because she chooses faithfulness to her mother-in-law. She chooses, I'm going to be with you through it all. And we begin to see this faithful story, and in a weird way, she's faithful to Naomi, whose life just fell apart. And it says when she gets back to her land, she literally tells people, hey, don't even call me Naomi no more, call me Mara, which literally means bitter. And she says, call me bitter because God has made my life so bitter. My life is filled with bitterness because God made my life all bitter. And she lives in this bitter place. And I don't know if any of you have ever lived with a bitter person. They're not a fun person to be around. Yet that's who Ruth chooses to still be loyal to still be faithful to. And the big reason why, truthfully, Naomi moved back is because she heard that there was actually a harvest. And she gets there in perfect time. It's harvest season. But here's the reality. She still has no land. Remember, her husband died. Her sons died. She's going to a place where she has no land to even harvest. Yet, we still continue to see this faithfulness of Ruth because she turns to her mother-in-law and says, hey, don't worry about it. The fields that they're harvesting, I'm just going to go behind them and I'm just going to pick up the scraps. You know, it's about uncomfortable. That's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to live off of scraps. Yet that's what we see Ruth be willing to do. And she's like, hey, I'm going to go behind on the field as they do their harvest. I'll go behind them and just pick up what we can so we can be okay. Out of loyalty and out of faithfulness to her mother-in-law. And the reality is that should have been a normal practice. Because according to the law, which Leviticus is one of those books that gets a very bad rap in today's world. Leviticus is this book with all these rules and all these things that God was so mean and evil and he made all these rules. But really, when you read the book of Leviticus, you see a lot of the good that God was trying to do. Because according to the book of Leviticus, this was the law they were supposed to be upholding. This is how they were supposed to be living as a people. And this is what it says in Leviticus 19 about this idea of harvest. In verse 9, It says, when you reap your harvest of your land, do not reap to every edge of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. This is the powerful point of where you see where God was trying to do something good. In verse 10, it says, do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Why? Because we need to leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord, your God. That's a faithful God. That's a God that's looking out for the least of these. Again, look out for the poor and the foreigner. What is Ruth and Naomi in this time? Poor and the foreigner. This should have been the norm during this time. This should have been normal practice, but let's remember, this takes place during the time of the judges, and nobody was living up to this. Because everyone did what they saw was fit in their own eyes. In our own eyes as humans, we want everything. We want our scraps. We want every single part of it because we want to make sure our margin is as high as possible. So this was truthfully a very dangerous thing for her to do, to go after behind the harvesters and pick up scraps. This wasn't a safe thing. To contextualize a little bit more, maybe this is more relatable to the people in the house, Caribbean people, right? Remember this, mango season? Pick up your neighbor's mangoes, see what happens, right? It's probably not going to end well. Yet that's what she's willing to do. She's willing to go into her neighbor's yard and pick up mangoes. Some neighbors trip over the mangoes over the fence, right? They get mad at that. Yet that's how uncomfortable she was willing to make herself out of loyalty to the one that she was serving. She was willing to pick up the scraps, and it should have been a normal thing. And here's the thing. This is where we begin to see God behind it all. She just so happens to pick the field of one of the only faithful people left in Israel. Because she picks the field of this person named Boaz. And this is what it says when we first see Boaz in chapter 2, verse 4. This says, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. And this is what he said, the Lord be with you. He didn't say, hey, why are you guys in my yard? He didn't say, hey, he said, the Lord be with you. Living in a place where everybody was looking to serve themselves and widen their own field and widen their own expenses and all of that, he's still loyal to the law. He's still loyal to God's good law. And the harvester would respond, and they said, the Lord bless you. So she just so happens to pick the field of this one faithful person of Boaz. And Boaz is out in the field, and he sees Ruth, and he asks his overseers about her. He says, hey, who is that woman? And the overseers, at this point, the word of Naomi had spread. Because here's the reality, in a broken world, we love to see other people's breakdown. That's the world we live in. Word spreads fast. Like, do you hear about that terrible situation that they're in? Did you hear how broke they are now? That's, in a sense, what happened with Naomi. Word of her brokenness had spread to everybody. And not just spread of her brokenness, but also the foreign woman that came with her. So his overseer said, oh yeah, that's Ruth. She's the foreign woman who came with Naomi. And this is what they said about her. They said she had been working in the field with little to no rest. She was working as hard as she could for Naomi. And at this, Boaz is really impressed with her faithfulness, her willingness to work out in the fields, again, picking up scraps, that he goes to her in a very humble way, and he acknowledges her. And not only does he acknowledge her, he says, hey, I've seen all the things that you're doing. I want you to know you can come into my field anytime you want, because here I'm going to protect you. Here I'm going to make sure you're safe. And not only are you safe, my water supply is your water supply. I see the hard work that you're doing. I see the faithfulness that you're doing. Everything that I have, feel free to take from it. The people that work for me, you can eat with them. And it's this crazy picture of generosity that we see from Boaz to this foreign woman. And her response to this is pretty simple. In verse 10, she literally says, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me? I think that question itself, I think there's a lot of us in this room that question if God even notices the trouble that we're in. Maybe you cried that out to God. God, do you even notice me? Yet she recognizes that Boaz does. Why would you even notice me? I'm a foreigner. Why would you pay any attention to me? And Boaz's response speaks to this idea of the faithfulness that he sees in her. In verse 11, he says, I've been told about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother, your land, and have come to the people you did not know before. And this is what he said. He said, may the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. He says, hey, I see all this work that you're doing, and I know God's going to reward you for it. She wasn't looking for a reward. She wasn't looking for a blessing. All she was simply doing was being faithful to the one she was caring for, of Ruth. That's all she cared about. Again, living off of scraps. She was just being faithful to her mother-in-law. And this is, again, where I'm challenged. Because she wasn't looking for anybody to look at her. Why would you even notice me? This is my second point today, is this. Unseen faithfulness is seen by God. I hope you know that, and I hope you recognize that. Because here's the thing. Throughout our life, there's going to be a lot of times where we feel like nobody notices the work that we're putting in. And what happens is when we feel like nobody notices it, it puts us in a place where we take a step back. We stop working as hard. Because, hey, does anyone even notice the work that I'm putting in, the stress that I'm putting in? Yet, here's this reality. The work that she was doing, it wasn't about being noticed. It was simply about being faithful to Naomi. She was just faithful to the one she was working for. And for us, we have to ask ourselves, are we faithful to the one that we're working for? That person being God. Are you faithful to the field that he's placed you in? Just a couple of weeks ago, we had our business leaders breakfast, and we challenged our business leaders to lead in a way, not to just increase margin, not to just have a bigger profit, not just to build the biggest business ever, but because we understand the God we're representing in these business fields. That's what they talked about. And this is where I want to challenge you in your workplaces. The unseen work that you do, are you working at it with all of your heart? Or are you behind your cubicle playing Candy Crush, scrolling Instagram? Because nobody can see you. Are we taking advantage of those kind of quiet moments in our life? Or are we continuing to work hard, work faithfully, the same way we saw Ruth do? Because I think the reality is a lot of us try to look for ways to cut corners, how to do less work, how to have more free time. Because we want everything to be easy. But there's this reality, sometimes it's going to be hard. And sometimes the hard work we do is going to seem to go unseen by everybody. But here's where I want to remind you, there is an all-seeing God that notices you. There's an all-seeing God that notices the things that you do. So hopefully the way you present yourself in public matches up with the work that you do in private. Think about your family. Are you putting in work in your family? Or do you just walk into church like everything's okay? We weren't just fighting in the car. Don't worry about it. We're smiling. We're good. Hey, our kids are well behaved. Behind closed doors, does that match up with the private, the quiet time that you're actually trying to do? Yet that's exactly what we need to be mindful of, that God sees it all. And not I don't want you to be at a place where you're scared now because God's always watching. I want you to do it out of faithfulness of the one that you're serving. That's what we see with Ruth. She wasn't doing it out of fear. She was doing it out of understanding she wanted to work for the one that she was being loyal to, the one that she was being faithful to. And I think that's the thing that we need to do as well. And it leads to, again, this place where now she has a place where she can provide for herself and provide for Naomi. But here's the thing, the story of faithfulness doesn't just stop at the field. It doesn't just stop at this foreign woman's faithfulness, because it shifts to now the faithfulness of Boaz himself. Because what happens is she goes back home, and as she goes back home, she tells Naomi, hey, I was working at this field, and the field belonged to Boaz, this guy named Boaz. She didn't even really know who he was. And this is Naomi's response. We see a total 180 in her attitude. This is what she said. Remember, she was saying, God made my life bitter, called me bitter. That was her mindset about God. This is what she says in verse 20. The Lord bless him. We see a complete 180. And speaking of God, this is what he said. He has not showing his kindness to the living and the dead. She said, that man is our close relative. He is our guardian redeemer. Her whole life changes. Her whole perspective changes because she went from a place of God forgot about me, God made my life so bitter, to recognizing God was still at work. To recognizing that even in this situation where her life fell apart, oh snap, God is still with them. God is still guiding them because he guided them to their guardian redeemer. And many of us in this room are like, what is a guardian redeemer? This is where, again, I want to remind you, the law that God gave was good. It wasn't just rule books, because one of those laws was this principle of the guardian redeemer. And again, the heart of it was to help those in need. In Leviticus 25:25, this is what it says. It says, if one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem them what they have sold. There's this idea of when we have those people who are in need, we should be willing to pull them up out of that. And it's the job of their closest relative to help them do that. Their family, their home, their community was to pull them up out of that poverty that they were in. That's what God instructed his people to do. And the person that was supposed to do that is their closest relative, the brunt of that. And guess what? Boaz was a relative of theirs. Boaz was that exact person that they needed to pull them out of this horrible situation that they were in. So that's why Naomi's at this place of like, yeah, God's still good. God's still working. And this is what she tells Ruth. She says, hey, keep working in that field. And not just that, make sure you look your best. Make sure you smell good, all of that. And if you don't believe me, read the story. I promise you. I'm going to give you homework. Read the whole thing. She literally says, hey, make sure you smell good. Because that's our guardian redeemer. Because part of the guardian redeemer process is you would take them, if there was a widow, if there was a case of a widow, you would marry them. So she's like, hey, keep working and look your best. That's what she says to her daughter-in-law. And here's the thing, she stays faithful to it. And not only that, don't just continue to work there. At some point, do the very bold thing of asking him pretty much to marry you. Sounds backwards. That's what the guy is supposed to do. Yet that's what she does. She says, hey, you're gonna lay at his feet as a sign of just asking, and then you're gonna ask him to cover you. And that sign of covering is this idea of a covenantal marriage that you're asking for. And here's the thing, Ruth listens. She listens to her mother-in-law, and she does all of this, and Boaz's response isn't like, hey, you're crazy, get up out of here. He understands his role, what he's supposed to do. He understands how good the law is, and he's overjoyed. He's grateful that she would even ask him, because at this point, he's seen her character. He's seen how noble she is, and he'd love to do it. But he's so tied to the law, he wants to make sure he doesn't skip any step. He actually tells her, hey, there's actually this closer relative, and it's his job. Not because he didn't want to do it, but because he wanted to make sure he was living up to the standard, staying faithful to what God had instructed them to do. So he lets her know that. He says, stay the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty, speaking of this other relative, your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But here's where we see his faithfulness. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. He takes the responsibility. He says, hey, even if this closer relative of yours is not willing to do the hard thing of redeeming you, I'll do it. So the very next morning, he goes to all the city elders, and he pulls in the closer relative, and he says, hey, there's this land that needs redeeming. There's this land that's available for purchase from one of our relatives. And this guy's like, yeah, sounds good. I get to expand my land. I get to expand my territory. And he's all in for it. Until Boaz says, hey, this land also comes with Naomi and Ruth. It comes with this brokenness attached to it. And the guy's like, I don't know if I could do that. It's too much of a risk. Because here's the thing, he cared about the possessions, he didn't care about the people. He was faithful to a point. He was faithful. He was willing to be faithful if that means he would increase his territory. He was faithful if it means he was going to have more land. But the second it became about people, he backed out. Yet this is where we see Boaz's faithfulness. Because as this other relative backed out, this is his response. this is what he says to kind of begin to close out this whole idea. Is he comes before all the elders, and he says, today you are my witnesses. I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech and his sons. So the property part, the possessions part, but here's where it changes. But I've also acquired Ruth the Moabite as my wife. He got the possessions, but he also did so to care for his people, because he says, in order that they may maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from his family or his household. Today you are my witnesses. He makes this very public declaration of saying, hey, I'm going to redeem them, not just their land, but the people. These broken people in poverty, in brokenness, those are the people I'm going to care for. I'm going to take under my care so their name doesn't get forgotten. And it brings me to my last point, and it's this. This is our challenge as believers. My second to last point is this. True faithfulness puts people before possessions. For us as believers, more than anybody, the real test of our faithfulness to God is how we care for people. And how we care for people that can't give us anything at all. How we care for people when it has nothing to do with increasing our own territory. How we care for people when it doesn't improve our influence. How we care for people when it's at risk to our own well-being. Because that's what we see Boaz willing to do. To care for the people more than just the possessions. So how about this? This is my question I want to ask you guys. The same love that you profess to God, is it also seen in how you love people? That's the test. Because great, you love God, but are you also doing the hard thing of loving those people, especially those people you don't really like? You want to know what's going to be the test? Thursday. You got to sit across from that relative you've been beefing with quietly for a couple years. Do you still love them? That's the test. That coworker that annoys you, do you still love them? Are you still willing to serve them? That boss that gets on your nerves, you still love them? How about this? That person that's on the other side of the political aisle, the political spectrum, do you still love them? That's the challenge. Are you willing to love the poor, the forgotten, the foreigner? That's the test of true faithfulness. And I say that not just because of this story that we see, but because of the very words of Jesus. This is what he said to his followers, his disciples, that are same thing applies to us today. He says, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this they will know that you are my disciples. How? If you love one another. That's the test of faithfulness. Are you truly loving the people around you, even if that means you can't get anything from them? Even if it's hard to love them, are you truly faithful to that God? Because here's the reality. He loved you that same way. And this story of love, again, takes place in this world of chaos, in this world of brokenness. And a lot of times when people tell this story of Ruth and Boaz, they tell it as a love story. But again, I think more than it being a love story, I think it's a story of faithfulness. Because as the story ends, as it begins to wrap up, this is what we learn about how God was still orchestrating a bigger story of redemption. Boaz, he redeems Ruth and Naomi. Praise God for that. But there's this bigger redemption that God's doing behind the scenes of all of this. This is what it says at the end of in chapter 4. It says that in verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth to become his wife, and he made love to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. In verse 16, it says, Naomi took the child into her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, father of David. In case you guys lost it, in the beginning of this message, I talked about how in those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. I don't want to assume you know who David is, but David would end up being Israel's greatest king. In the time where there was all this chaos, in the time where all these people were doing all the things in their own eyes, and in the time where there was all this brokenness, God behind the scenes was quietly bringing them the thing they needed. Bringing them and starting the line of this person named David, who would be their greatest human king, who would be the man after God's own heart, who would be that same David that slew Goliath. God was raising up, in a sense, that king. The king that would be the answer to a lot of the problems that they had. But we miss it. Because all we see is the brokenness around us. We see all the chaos around us, that we forget that behind the scenes in our own lives, God is still bringing us a king. God is still bringing us the resolution to the problems that we face. And here's the even crazier thing. It doesn't stop at David. Because from that same line of David would come the greatest king of all time. The King of Kings, Jesus, who didn't come to just fix Israel's brokenness, but he came to fix the world's brokenness. And here's the thing, for all the people that want to be kings and queens of their own life, you know what the Bible tells us? At the end of all of this, every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess that Jesus is king. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, that's the king that God was setting up during this time of chaos, during this time of brokenness. God was behind the scenes raising up the king that we all need. It's this beautiful story of faithfulness we miss because we're all looking at our own brokenness. But this is what it says when we talk about this future faithfulness that we'll see one day, when that king is seated on the throne. This is what it says. It says, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And this is the encouragement. Verse 4, he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things, the brokenness we deal with now, will one day pass away when that King of Kings is on the throne. In verse 5, and Jesus says, I am making everything new. No matter how broken you feel like your life is, no matter how broken you feel like your situation is, here's what I want to encourage you with my last point. Jesus is our faithful Redeemer. You have a King of Kings, a Lord of Lords that sees you in your brokenness. The same way Boaz saw Ruth in her brokenness, in her desperation, there's a God that sees you and he recognizes you. And he doesn't look at you just with pity, just as who is this broken person? He looks at you and says, hey, I want to redeem you. I want to redeem your life. That brokenness that you're dealing with, I want to make you whole. That breakdown that you're dealing with, I want to help you with it. That's the God that we serve. That's the God that's available to every single one of us in this room. A God that wants to redeem us all. And here's the most powerful thing about this. Jesus didn't pay for us just with money or possessions. He paid for us with his blood. Because he would die on the cross for us. He would look at you on your brokenness, hang from that cross, and say, hey, I'm paying for their brokenness. I'm paying for every sin they've ever committed. I'm dying so that they can have hope for a better future. A future with me in a forever place where there's no more brokenness, where there's no more pain, where there's no more sin. So here's what I want to do is I want to ask everybody to bow their head and close their eyes. And I want to give you guys an opportunity to deal with your brokenness, to present your brokenness to God. To say, God, I've been the king of my own life. I've been the queen of my own life, but I could honestly admit it's all chaos. It's all brokenness. And I need somebody to help me pick up the pieces of my life that feels shattered, my mind that feels shattered, my heart that feels broken. So I'm going to lead you in this prayer, and I want you to just repeat after me. It's a simple prayer, and it's not the prayer itself that necessarily saves you. It's the heart behind it of choosing to truly trust in Jesus as your faithful Redeemer. Repeat after me. God, I admit that I'm a sinner. God, I admit that I've been broken. And I've been trying to do things my own way. But God, I believe you would send Jesus to live the perfect life that I couldn't. And I believe he would die on the cross for me, for my brokenness, and for my sin. And I believe he would raise 3 days later, defeating the grave and defeating my sin. And it's because of that I can be redeemed. So God, I choose to put my faith in Jesus. I choose to turn away from my sin and brokenness. And God, I choose to follow him today. Lord, make Jesus the King of my life. Help me follow his ways. And help me love him more every day. And it's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen. Give it up for those people who prayed that prayer. That is the greatest decision you'll ever make in your life. And if you prayed that prayer for the first time, especially, up on the screen, there'll be a little salvation slide. I want to encourage you to text it just because us as pastors, we want to be able to celebrate the decision you made, but we also want to help you walk with this, get you plugged into community where you can find some encouragement, some accountability, some how to even read your Bible. We want to help you with all of that, get you plugged in to this God that wants to walk with you through all of the brokenness that you'll face. But Oasis Church, I pray you guys were challenged. I pray you guys were blessed. And remember, God is faithful. And we can just be thankful for that, guys. Thank you. And I pray you guys are blessed.